The world keeps walking when old people fall. That was the first thing Damien Moretti said to me the night we met. But 5 hours earlier, all I knew was that my entire future was slipping through my fingers in the middle of a freezing Manhattan rainstorm. My phone read 8:12 a.m. as I sprinted down Lexington Avenue, one hand gripping my coat shut against the wind while the other clutched the folder, holding my resume like it was oxygen itself. The interview at St. Vincent Medical Center started at 9 sharp, and after 3 years of community college classes, double shifts at Rosie's Diner, and living off instant noodles and gas station coffee, this was finally supposed to be my way out. The sidewalks were packed with people moving fast beneath umbrellas and coffee cups and expensive coats that probably cost more than my monthly rent. Nobody looked at each other. Nobody slowed down. That's New York. You keep moving or you get swallowed whole. I checked the time again as I reached the subway entrance, my chest burning from the cold air. 23 minutes. If the train came on time, I'd make it with enough time to breathe before the interview. Then I heard the scream. Not loud, not dramatic, just startled. Human. I turned automatically and saw an elderly woman collapse near the corner crosswalk beside a newspaper stand, her grocery bags spilling across the wet pavement as people stepped around her like she was an inconvenient pothole. One man glanced down, then kept walking while talking into his AirPods. A woman in heels swerved around the scene without breaking stride. The old woman tried to push herself up, but her hands trembled too badly. I should have kept going. God help me, I knew I should have. My future was sitting 20 blocks away in a navy blue office with fluorescent lighting and a hiring manager probably checking her watch already. But something about the woman's face stopped me. Maybe it was the fear in her eyes. Maybe it was because she reminded me of my grandmother before Alzheimer's took her memory one piece at a time. Or maybe I was just stupid enough to still believe people should matter more than schedules. I ran toward her before my brain could stop me. Ma'am? Hey, are you hurt? Rain soaked through my sneakers instantly as I knelt beside her. Up close, she looked about 80, silver hair pinned neatly despite the weather, elegant wool coat, pearl earrings. Definitely not someone who belonged alone on a freezing sidewalk. Her breathing sounded shallow. I'm all right, she whispered automatically, which is exactly what people say when they absolutely are not all right. One of her grocery bags had split open. Oranges rolled through dirty rainwater toward the curb. I grabbed them while trying not to panic. Can you stand? She tried. Failed immediately. Her knees buckled hard enough that I barely caught her before she hit the pavement again. That's when I noticed how cold her hands felt. Not winter cold. Wrong cold. Okay, I said, forcing calm into my voice the same way my nursing instructors taught us during clinicals. We're not doing this on the sidewalk. I looked around for help. Nobody stopped. Nobody even slowed down. Yellow taxis sprayed water onto the curb as they passed. Somewhere nearby, a car horn blared endlessly. The city just kept moving. The woman touched my wrist weakly. You'll miss something important, she said softly, almost like she already knew. My throat tightened because the truth was written all over my face. I looked down at my phone one more time. 8:19 a.m. Then I shoved it into my pocket and tightened my grip around her freezing hands. Yeah, I whispered. Probably. The ambulance arrived 11 minutes later, though it felt like an hour sitting there beside Evelyn Hayes while freezing rain soaked through my jeans and turned my coat into dead weight. I stayed crouched next to her on the sidewalk the entire time, one hand wrapped around hers while the paramedics checked her vitals beneath flashing red lights that painted the wet street like something unreal. Mild arrhythmia, one of them said quietly to his partner while attaching monitors to her chest. Blood pressure is dropping. Evelyn looked embarrassed more than frightened, which somehow made my chest hurt worse. I told you I was fine, she murmured to me while they helped lift her onto the stretcher. You should have gone to your interview. I forced a smile I definitely did not feel. And let you scare random pedestrians alone in the rain? Not happening. She laughed softly at that. Even exhausted and pale beneath the ambulance lights, there was something graceful about her. Expensive. Refined. The kind of woman who probably drank tea from porcelain cups and remembered handwritten birthdays. One of the paramedics turned toward me. Family. No, I answered automatically. Evelyn looked at me for a second before speaking. She is now. I do not know why those words hit me so hard, but suddenly my eyes burned worse than the freezing wind. The ride to Mount Sinai took 12 minutes through morning traffic. I sat beside the stretcher while the city blurred past rain-streaked windows, trying not to look at the clock on my phone every 30 seconds like it would somehow change reality. 9:03, 9:11, 9:19. Each minute felt like another door quietly closing somewhere far away. By the time we reached the emergency entrance, my dream job interview had officially started without me. Inside the hospital, everything smelled like antiseptic, coffee, and exhaustion. Familiar. Safe, almost. Nurses moved quickly through fluorescent hallways while monitors beeped steadily in distant rooms. I helped Evelyn into a wheelchair while a resident doctor asked questions about medications and emergency contacts. My grandson handles most of that, she said vaguely. He worries too much. Good. I muttered while adjusting the blanket around her knees. Somebody should. That earned me another small smile. 2 hours passed before the doctor finally emerged from the examination room and assured us it was dehydration combined with stress and an irregular heartbeat that needed monitoring but was not immediately dangerous. Relief hit me so hard my legs nearly gave out. I had not realized how tightly wounded I was until that moment. Evelyn reached for my hand again once the doctor left. You stayed. Of course I stayed. Most people would not have. Her voice held no bitterness. Somehow that made it worse. I glanced toward the hallway windows where rain still slid endlessly. Down the glass. My interview was long over by now. Gone. Finished. 3 years of work, student loans, sleepless nights, and hope probably erased because I stopped to help a stranger. For one ugly second, resentment flared inside me before guilt crushed it immediately afterward. Evelyn noticed anyway. Older people always notice everything. Call them, she said gently. Maybe they will understand. I already knew they would not. Hospitals in New York had hundreds of applicants lined up for every open position. Nobody waited for the girl who showed up late. Still, I stepped into the hallway and made the call with trembling fingers. The hiring coordinator sounded polite in the cold professional way people do when delivering disappointment for the 100th time that day. I am sorry, Claire, she said. The panel finished interviews an hour ago. We have already selected another candidate. I thanked her because apparently humiliation comes with manners now. Then I hung up and stood there staring at my reflection in the dark hospital window while thunder rolled somewhere over Manhattan. I looked exhausted. Wet hair falling loose from my ponytail. Cheap coat soaked through. Mascara smudged beneath tired eyes. Not the woman who was supposed to build a future today. Just another broke girl who made one emotional decision and lost everything because of it. Behind me, Evelyn's quiet voice carried down the hallway. Claire. I wiped my face quickly before turning around. Yeah. She studied me for a long moment from her hospital bed. Then she said something that made absolutely no sense at the time. Some opportunities arrive dressed differently than we expect. By the time I left Mount Sinai, the rain had stopped, but Manhattan still looked drowned. Water reflected across the sidewalks beneath yellow taxi lights and glowing storefront signs while cold wind whipped through the avenues hard enough to sting my face. My shoes squished with every step toward the subway station. I checked my bank account while waiting for the downtown train and immediately regretted it. $42.17. Rent due in 6 days. Student loan payment overdue. Dream job. Officially gone. I laughed under my breath because sometimes your life gets so bad it circles back around to funny. Across the platform, a violin player performed for commuters rushing past without listening. Nobody stopped. Nobody ever stopped. The train screamed into the station 3 minutes later, crowded shoulder to shoulder with exhausted strangers carrying briefcases, shopping bags, and tired eyes. I stood gripping the overhead rail while my reflection flickered against the dark subway window. 24 years old and already tired in my bones. When I finally pushed open the back entrance to Rosie's Diner at 4:30 that afternoon, the smell of grease and burnt coffee hit me like routine itself. Familiar. Predictable. Safe in the saddest possible way. Maria glanced up from refilling ketchup bottles near the kitchen pass-through. You look like hell. Thank you. I muttered while tying my apron around my waist. Really uplifting atmosphere in here today. She frowned immediately. Wait, how did the interview go? I kept my eyes down while shoving my damp coat into my locker. Fantastic if they were hiring people who show up 2 hours late looking like drowned raccoons. Maria winced. Oh no. Yeah. I grabbed a tray before she could say anything sympathetic because I knew myself well enough to understand that if someone acted too kind right now, I might actually cry beside the coffee machine. The dinner rush started early. Construction workers filled the counter stools while tourists wandered in from the cold asking for pie and hot chocolate. Plates clattered. Orders shouted across the kitchen. Country music played too loudly through old ceiling speakers that crackled every few minutes. Normal. Completely normal. I almost managed to forget the disaster of my day for nearly an hour until the diner suddenly went quiet. Not fully silent. Just different. Like the entire room inhaled at once. I noticed it immediately because people stopped talking mid-sentence. Forks paused halfway to mouths. Even the kitchen seemed quieter somehow. Then headlights swept across the front windows. Black SUVs. 3 of them. Expensive enough that they looked unreal parked. Outside a place with a flickering neon pie sign. The front door opened slowly. Cold evening air rolled inside first. Then the men followed. Dark suits. Clean haircuts. Calm expressions that somehow felt more intimidating than anger ever could. They spread through the diner with quiet precision, not aggressive, not loud, just controlled. The kind of men who made everyone instinctively lower their voices without understanding why. Maria appeared beside me holding a coffee pot in frozen hands. "Claire," she whispered, "why do I suddenly feel like we are in a crime documentary?" I almost answered her. Then he walked in. Tall. Broad shoulders beneath a charcoal wool coat, still speckled with rain. Dark hair brushed neatly back from a face that looked carved instead of born. There was no dramatic entrance. No shouting. No performance. He simply stepped into the diner and somehow changed the entire atmosphere around him. Power rolled off him quietly. Effortlessly. Like breathing. Conversations died completely this time. One of the construction workers near the counter actually lowered his eyes. The man scanned the room once with calm gray-blue eyes that missed absolutely nothing. Then those eyes landed on me. My stomach dropped so fast it physically hurt. He walked toward my section with measured steps while the men behind him remained near the entrance. Watching. Waiting. Protecting him maybe. I tightened my grip around the tray hard enough that my knuckles turned white. The closer he came, the more unreal he looked. Expensive watch beneath his coat sleeve. Sharp jawline shadowed faintly from a long day. Calm expression hiding something colder underneath. He stopped directly in front of me. Close enough that I caught the faint scent of rain and cedar cologne. "Claire Bennett," he said quietly. Not a question. My pulse stumbled. "Yes." His gaze held mine steadily for one long second before he spoke again. "My grandmother would like to see you tomorrow." For a second, I genuinely thought this was some kind of joke. Maybe one of Maria's cousins playing a prank after overhearing me complain about my ruined life all afternoon. But nobody jokes like that while standing in the middle of a silent diner surrounded by men who looked like they belonged in armored vehicles instead of booths serving pancakes. The man in front of me waited calmly while I tried to remember how breathing worked. Up close, his eyes were not fully blue like I first thought. More gray mixed with storm clouds. Controlled eyes. Dangerous eyes. The kind that noticed details people usually missed. "Your grandmother?" I repeated stupidly. One corner of his mouth moved slightly, not quite a smile. "Evelyn Hayes." Understanding hit instantly. Oh, somehow that single word carried every emotion inside me at once. Relief that Evelyn was all right. Confusion about whatever this situation was. And growing awareness that the elegant older woman from the sidewalk clearly belonged to a world very different from mine. "She is doing well," he said. "She asked for you specifically." Maria nearly dropped the coffee pot beside me. I could physically feel her staring at the side of my head. "I should probably get back to work," I managed carefully. My manager does not love when customers form dramatic human walls near table 7. For the first time, something warmer flickered briefly across his expression. Gone almost instantly. Of course. He reached into his coat pocket and placed a simple black business card onto my tray. Heavy cardstock. No logo. No address. Just a name embossed in silver letters. Damien Moretti. Beneath it sat a phone number. Nothing else. No explanation needed apparently. "Tomorrow at noon," he said quietly. "A driver will pick you up." My brain finally restarted enough to object. "That is really not necessary." It was not a request, Claire. The way he said my name should not have affected me. But it did. Calm. Certain. Like he expected the world to rearrange itself around his decisions. And maybe it usually did. He stepped back then, adjusting one sleeve of his coat with precise movements while the diner slowly remembered how to breathe again around us. A child near the window whispered something to his mother. One of the cooks peeked through the kitchen, passed through looking terrified. Damien glanced toward the front windows where rain still streaked the glass in silver lines. My grandmother has not stopped talking about you for 5 hours, he said without looking at me. That alone makes you unusual. Then he walked away. Just like that. No dramatic goodbye. No threats. Nothing loud or theatrical. But every person in the diner tracked his movement anyway. The men near the entrance immediately followed him outside, while the black SUVs idled beneath glowing streetlights. 30 seconds later, they disappeared into Manhattan traffic like they had never been there at all. Silence held for exactly 2 beats. Then the entire diner exploded. Claire Bennett. Maria hissed while grabbing my arm hard enough to nearly spill coffee everywhere. Why does Batman know your full legal name? I do not know. No, seriously. Was that the president of organized crime? Maria. That man looked like he owns private islands. I rubbed both hands over my face, exhausted beyond words. An old lady fell this morning. I helped her. Apparently her grandson arrives in convoys. That was not a convoy, Maria whispered dramatically. That was a warning sign with headlights. Normally I would have laughed. Tonight, I just felt tired. Deeply tired. The kind of tired that settles behind your ribs. Around 10:30, I finally clocked out and stepped into the cold night air alone. The city smelled like rain, gasoline, and roasted chestnuts from a street cart down the block. I shoved my hands into my coat pockets while heading toward the subway entrance. That was when I found the envelope. Thick cream-colored paper tucked into my apron pocket. My heartbeat stumbled instantly because I knew it had not been there before. I stopped beneath a flickering street lamp and opened it carefully. Inside sat a single folded sheet. St. Vincent Medical Center letterhead. My stomach dropped. Hands trembling, I unfolded the page slowly and stared at the words for a full 5 seconds before my brain understood them. Due to an unexpected staffing change, we would like to offer you a second interview opportunity tomorrow afternoon. I read the sentence 3 times. Then I noticed the handwritten note beneath it in sharp, elegant script. Kindness should never cost someone their future. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the silver lettering on Damien Moretti's business card and the impossible sentence at the bottom of the hospital letter. Kindness should never cost someone their future. I must have read it 20 times sitting on the edge of my bed while radiator pipes rattled inside my tiny Queens apartment like they were trying to escape the walls. By 6:30 in the morning, I gave up on sleep completely. Rain tapped softly against the fire escape outside, while gray winter light crept through crooked blinds. My apartment smelled like cheap laundry detergent and burnt toast because I forgot the bread in the toaster while staring at the interview letter again. None of this made sense. Hospitals do not reopen interviews overnight because a waitress had a rough morning. Powerful strangers do not send handwritten notes after meeting someone for 30 seconds inside a diner. Men like Damien Moretti did not notice women like me. And yet somehow, all of it was happening anyway. My phone buzzed across the kitchen counter while I searched for my least wrinkled blouse. Unknown number. I hesitated before answering. Hello, Miss Bennett. A calm female voice. Professional. Controlled. This is Angela from Moretti Enterprises. Mr. Moretti's driver will arrive at 11:45 for your lunch visit with Miss Evelyn Hayes. Will you require transportation to your interview afterward? I nearly dropped the phone. I am sorry. What? Transportation to St. Vincent Medical Center, she repeated politely. Your interview is scheduled for 2:15 this afternoon. Silence. Complete silence while my brain tried desperately to catch up. How do you know about that? Another small pause. Mr. Moretti prefers efficiency. Of course he did. Men who traveled with security details probably organized oxygen molecules before breathing them. That really is not necessary, I said carefully while pulling my hair into a ponytail in the cracked microwave reflection because my bathroom mirror had fallen 2 weeks ago and I still could not afford to replace it. I can take the subway. The car will arrive at 11:45, Angela repeated gently. Then she hung up before I could argue again. I stared at the dead phone screen for several seconds. Somewhere deep inside me, warning bells started ringing softly. Not because Damien frightened me exactly. It was worse than that. He made impossible things happen quietly, effortlessly. People like me survive by understanding exactly how much control we do not have over our lives. Damien Moretti moved through the world like rules adjusted themselves around him. That kind of power should have terrified me more than it did. At 11:42 sharp, a black sedan pulled up outside my apartment building. Of course it did. I saw it through the window while buttoning my coat, glossy enough to reflect the cloudy sky like black water. The driver stood beside the rear passenger door wearing a dark suit and gloves despite the cold. My landlord nearly sprinted across the lobby when I came downstairs. Mr. Garrison usually avoided eye contact whenever I asked about the broken washing machine or flickering hallway lights. Today he practically smiled himself unconscious. "Miss Bennett," he said warmly, opening the front door for me himself. "You have a wonderful day now." I slowed immediately. "Are you feeling okay?" His smile twitched slightly. "Perfectly fine." That was suspicious enough already. Then I noticed the brand new security camera installed above the lobby mailboxes. Yesterday it had not existed. Outside, cold wind whipped down the street, carrying the smell of snow somewhere nearby. The driver nodded respectfully when he saw me. "Miss Bennett." He opened the rear door smoothly. Warm leather seats. Soft instrumental music playing low through hidden speakers. Everything smelled expensive in a way I could not even define. Not flashy, just precise. Controlled. Like every detail had been selected intentionally. As we pulled away from Queens traffic toward Manhattan, I caught myself watching the city pass through tinted windows while nerves twisted tighter in my stomach. I should have been focused on the interview, on my future. Instead, I kept thinking about Evelyn Hayes lying in that hospital bed smiling softly while saying opportunities arrive dressed differently than we expect. 20 minutes later, the sedan slowed before a private hospital entrance blocked by polished black gates and discreet security. The driver turned toward me slightly. "Miss Hayes is waiting upstairs." I reached for the door handle, then paused. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Who exactly is Damien Moretti?" For the first time since meeting him, somebody hesitated before answering. The driver looked forward again carefully. "He is a man people listen to, Miss Bennett." Then the gates opened automatically. The hospital did not look like any medical center I had ever seen before. No crowded waiting rooms. No exhausted families sleeping in plastic chairs beneath flickering televisions. Everything here was quiet marble floors, soft lighting, and people who moved with practiced discretion. Even the air smelled expensive somehow. The elevator opened directly into a private floor where two men in dark suits stood near the reception desk, pretending not to watch me. They failed. One pressed a hand lightly against an earpiece as I stepped out. Definitely normal hospital behavior. A woman in navy scrubs approached immediately with a warm smile that somehow still looked nervous around the edges. "Miss Bennett, Miss Hayes is ready for you." I followed her through a wide hallway lined with abstract paintings that probably cost more than my apartment building. Somewhere in the distance, piano music drifted softly through hidden speakers. The entire place felt unreal. Like rich people had invented a completely separate version of illness for themselves. Evelyn's room overlooked Central Park through massive windows streaked with pale winter sunlight. She sat upright in bed wearing an ivory sweater instead of a hospital gown, silver hair perfectly brushed while a tray of untouched tea rested nearby. The moment she saw me, her entire face brightened. "Claire." Relief hit me unexpectedly hard. "You look a lot better." Because I had a frightening young woman yelling at doctors yesterday. I laughed before I could stop myself. I was not yelling. "You absolutely were." Her eyes sparkled mischievously. I liked it. I moved closer to the bed while she reached for my hands again with surprising warmth. Looking at her now, healthy and composed beneath soft afternoon light, it was difficult to connect this elegant woman with the fragile figure collapsing on a rain-soaked sidewalk yesterday morning. "You did not have to come," I told her honestly. "Nonsense. I needed to properly thank the person who prevented my grandson from losing his mind." There it was again. That subtle shift whenever Damien entered a conversation. Nurses straightened slightly when his name came up. Drivers chose words carefully. Even Evelyn spoke about him with equal parts affection and caution, like loving a thunderstorm. "He really seems worried about you," I said carefully. "Damien worries about very few people," she answered softly. "That is what makes it significant." Before I could respond, the hospital room door opened quietly behind me. Every muscle in my body tightened automatically. I did not need to turn around to know who entered the room. You do not mistake that kind of presence twice. Damien Moretti moved through the doorway wearing a charcoal suit dark enough to match the storm clouds gathering beyond the windows. No tie today, just the crisp white collar of his shirt beneath a long black coat folded neatly over one arm. His gaze landed on Evelyn first, scanning her quickly in a way that felt instinctive. Protective. Only after confirming she looked well did his attention shift toward me. The room suddenly felt smaller. "You came," Evelyn announced happily before either of us could speak. Damien's eyes remained on mine for one steady second too long. I said she would. Heat crawled unexpectedly up my neck, which was ridiculous because the man had barely spoken 6 words. I stepped back awkwardly. I should probably leave soon anyway. My interview starts at 2:15. "You will not be late," Damien said calmly. Traffic was accounted for. Of course it was. Evelyn hid a smile behind her teacup while I tried not to stare at him. Up close in daylight, he looked even more dangerous somehow. Not because of anything obvious. He simply carried himself like someone accustomed to control. Every movement economical. Precise. Like wasted energy annoyed him personally. A silver watch gleamed briefly beneath his sleeve as he loosened one cuff button. "Claire tells me she dislikes charity," Evelyn said suddenly. "Traitor. Absolute traitor." Damien glanced toward me slowly. "Does she?" I said I do not want people fixing my life behind my back. My voice came out steadier than expected. "Good." Something unreadable flickered across his expression. Not anger exactly. More interest. "And yet you accepted the second interview." "Because I earned it before yesterday happened." Silence settled briefly between us, while distant sirens echoed faintly through Manhattan streets below. Damien studied me carefully enough that my pulse started acting stupid again. "Most people," he said quietly, "would have kept walking yesterday morning." I shrugged uncomfortably. "Most people are exhausted. So are you." The words landed harder than they should have because he said them like an observation instead of criticism. Like he had actually noticed. Evelyn set down her teacup gently. "Damien." Something subtle passed between them then. Family history hidden beneath a single glance. Damien exhaled softly before reaching into his coat pocket and placing a small white envelope on the table beside me. "For your interview," he said. "What is it?" "Open it afterward." That answer makes me nervous. For the first time since meeting him, Damien smiled fully. Small. Brief. Dangerous in an entirely different way. "Good," he said softly. "It should." The driver dropped me outside St. Vincent Medical Center exactly 12 minutes before my interview. Of course he did. The black sedan barely slowed before a valet appeared instantly beneath the covered entrance. And for one surreal second, I sat frozen in the back seat staring at the hospital doors while my reflection looked back at me from the tinted glass. Same cheap coat. Same nervous eyes. Same girl from Queens who counted grocery prices before reaching the register. But somehow the world around me had shifted overnight. "Miss Bennett," the driver said gently from the front seat. "You will do well." I almost laughed at that because nobody had said words like that to me in a very long time. "Thanks." I stepped out into cold afternoon air carrying the white envelope Damien had given me. I still had not opened it. Partly because I forgot during lunch with Evelyn. Mostly because some instinct deep inside me understood that once I did, things would become even stranger. The hospital lobby buzzed with movement around me. Nurses crossing polished floors in soft blue scrubs. Families speaking quietly near elevators. Coffee carts steaming beneath fluorescent lights. Familiar chaos. Normal chaos. Thank God. I clung to that feeling all the way upstairs to human resources. The interview room sat at the end of a long hallway lined with framed photographs of smiling medical staff that looked aggressively inspirational. I paused outside the door to steady my breathing before entering. 3 interviewers waited inside. 2 women. One older man with silver glasses balanced low on his nose. All of them looked up as I entered. Then something unexpected happened. Their expressions softened immediately. Not polite exactly. Warm. Almost welcoming. "Claire Bennett," the older man said while standing to shake my hand. "We are very glad you came back today." Back today? Not despite yesterday. Not after missing your first interview. Like they had expected me all along. Unease flickered softly through my chest. The interview itself felt almost unreal. Questions flowed easily. My answers came naturally. Every time I mentioned patient care or overnight clinical rotations, they listened closely instead of glancing at clocks or laptops. The younger woman smiled when I described helping calm an elderly dementia patient during a difficult shift last year. You stayed 3 hours past your scheduled time? She asked. I shrugged lightly. She was frightened. The three interviewers exchanged a quick glance I could not fully read. That seems to be a pattern with you, the older man observed quietly. An hour later, I walked back into the hallway dazed and emotionally exhausted in the best possible way. The interview had gone better than any conversation of my life. Too well, maybe. Like invisible doors kept opening 1 second. Before I reached them, my fingers tightened around Damien's unopened envelope still tucked inside my purse. Enough. I needed answers. The hallway near the elevator stood empty except for a row of chairs facing rain-darkened windows overlooking Manhattan traffic below. I sat down slowly and finally opened the envelope. Inside rested a single folded sheet of paper and a photograph. My breath caught instantly. The photograph showed Evelyn Hayes standing beside a much younger Damien at what looked like a charity gala years ago. He could not have been older than 23. Still handsome, still sharp-eyed, but different somehow. Less controlled, more human around the edges. Evelyn smiled brightly beside him with one hand resting against his arm. Written across the back in elegant handwriting were 4 words. Before the world hardened him. Confused, I unfolded the paper next. No letter. No explanation. Just one sentence typed neatly across the center of the page. She used to stop for strangers too. I stared at the words while cold realization slowly crept through me. This was not about repayment anymore. Not fully. Something else moved beneath all of this. Something personal. My phone buzzed suddenly against my palm hard enough to make me jump. Unknown number again. I answered cautiously. Hello. Silence for half a second. Then Damien's voice. Low. Calm. Impossible to mistake. How did the interview go? My pulse betrayed me instantly. You already know how it went. Another brief silence. Not denial. Humor me. I leaned back against the hospital chair slowly while snow began drifting outside the windows in soft white spirals over Manhattan. I think it went well. Good. Just that single word somehow carried relief beneath it. Real relief. Before I could stop myself, the question slipped out quietly. Why are you doing all this for me? The line stayed silent long enough that I thought maybe he would not answer. Then finally, softly enough that I almost missed it, Damien said, because my grandmother recognized your heart before I did. Snow followed me all the way home that evening. Soft white flakes swirling through Manhattan traffic beneath glowing streetlights while Damien's words replayed endlessly inside my head. Because my grandmother recognized your heart before I did. Nobody had ever spoken to me like that before. Not like I was something worth noticing. The subway ride back to Queens blurred past in flashes of wet coats, tired commuters, and Christmas decorations already hanging in storefront windows even though Thanksgiving had barely ended. Across from me, a little girl slept against her mother's shoulder clutching a stuffed rabbit while an exhausted nurse in blue scrubs leaned against the subway pole beside the door with her eyes closed. Normal people. Normal lives. I should have felt relieved returning to my world after spending the day orbiting Damien Moretti's impossible gravity. Instead, I felt strangely restless, like something invisible had shifted beneath my feet. My phone buzzed halfway up the apartment stairs. Maria, tell me everything immediately, she demanded the second I answered. Did mysterious billionaire crime prince buy you a hospital? I laughed despite myself while fumbling for my keys. I had an interview. That is not enough information, and you know it. Nothing happened. Silence. Claire Bennett, she said slowly. You sound exactly like women in documentaries right before absolutely everything happens. I rolled my eyes while pushing open my apartment door. Good night, Maria. You are avoiding the question because I am right. Good night. I hung up still smiling faintly. The smile disappeared instantly the moment I stepped inside my apartment. Something was wrong. Every instinct in my body knew it before my brain caught up. The room looked untouched at first glance. Same tiny kitchen. Same thrift store couch beneath the window. Same stack of unpaid bills beside the microwave. But the air felt different somehow. Too still. My heartbeat slowed painfully. Then I noticed it. My bedroom door stood slightly open. I always closed it before leaving. Every single time. Cold crept slowly down my spine. Hello. Nothing answered. The radiator hissed softly somewhere in the silence. Snow tapped against the fire escape outside. I stepped deeper into the apartment carefully, pulse thudding harder with every movement. Maybe I forgot. Maybe I was overtired. Maybe. The bedroom light clicked on suddenly. I gasped aloud. A man stood near my window. Not Damien. Younger. Blonde hair cut short. Dark coat. Calm expression that somehow frightened me more than anger would have. "Miss Bennett," he said quietly, holding both hands visible at his sides. "Please do not panic." Which is exactly what terrifying people always say right before you panic. I backed toward the front door instantly. "Who are you?" "My name is Adrian." His eyes flicked briefly toward the hallway outside my apartment. "Listening. Watching. I work for Mr. Moretti." My fear collided immediately with confusion. "Why are you in my apartment?" Before he could answer, footsteps thundered rapidly up the hallway stairs outside. Multiple sets. Fast. Adrian's expression sharpened instantly. He moved toward me in 2 quick steps, lowering his voice. "You need to come with me right now." "Absolutely not." "Claire." The calm vanished from his voice for the first time. "Please." Someone slammed hard into the apartment building's front entrance downstairs, loud enough to echo through old pipes and walls. My stomach dropped instantly. Adrian pulled a phone from his coat pocket, already speaking into it. Movement confirmed. Another crash echoed upward from below, followed by angry shouting too muffled to understand. Fear finally arrived fully then. Real fear. Not anxiety. Not nerves. Something colder. "What is happening?" I whispered. Adrian looked toward me with grim focus. "Somebody has been asking questions about you all afternoon." My pulse stumbled violently. "Why?" He hesitated for 1 fatal second too long. Because he knew exactly why. Because somehow, impossibly, being noticed by Damien Moretti had changed the shape of my life faster than I understood. Another heavy impact rattled the hallway downstairs. "Closer now." Adrian stepped forward immediately. "Claire," he said sharply, "Mr. Moretti told me if anything ever frightened you, I should tell you the truth." The apartment lights flickered once. "You are no longer invisible." The hallway outside erupted with overlapping footsteps and angry voices while snow spiraled harder beyond my apartment windows, coating Queens in cold white silence that somehow made everything inside feel louder. Adrian moved instantly, crossing the room in 2 strides to shut off the apartment lights. Darkness swallowed us except for the pale glow leaking through the kitchen window from the street below. "Stay behind me," he said quietly. My pulse hammered so hard it hurt. "Who are those people?" Adrian glanced toward the front door as another heavy impact echoed downstairs. "Men who think frightening, innocent people sends messages." Fear crawled colder through my chest. Messages to who? But deep down I already knew the answer. Damien Moretti. Somehow my ordinary little life had collided with his world hard enough to create consequences. The thought should have terrified me more than it did. What frightened me most was realizing Damien had expected this. Why else would one of his men already be inside my apartment before trouble arrived? Adrian's phone buzzed softly in his hand. He checked the screen once before exhaling under his breath. "Good. Good." I whispered incredulously. "How is any of this good?" A sudden calm settled over his expression. "Because he is here." The hallway outside went silent. Completely silent. No more shouting. No more pounding footsteps. Just the distant hiss of snow against old fire escape rails and my own breathing filling the apartment. Adrian stepped back from the doorway slowly, respectfully, like somebody important had just entered the building. Then came the sound of measured footsteps climbing the stairs. Unhurried. Controlled. 1 pair only. Something about that calm terrified me more than the chaos before it. The footsteps stopped directly outside my apartment door. A heartbeat later, someone knocked once. Softly. Adrian unlocked the door immediately. Cold winter air swept inside, carrying the scent of snow and expensive cedar cologne. Damien stood in the hallway beneath flickering apartment lights, wearing a long black wool coat dusted with snowflakes across the shoulders. His expression looked perfectly calm at first glance, but his eyes were different tonight. Colder. Somehow. Sharper. Like polished steel beneath ice water. His gaze found me instantly in the dark apartment. Every ounce of tension inside me loosened before I could stop it. Relief hit so suddenly it almost embarrassed me. Damien noticed. Of course he did. He noticed everything. "Are you hurt?" he asked quietly. Not hello. Not explanation. Just that. I shook my head slowly. "No." He studied me for another second like he was personally confirming the truth of it. "Satisfied at last?" He stepped fully inside while Adrian closed the apartment door behind him. Damien removed one leather glove carefully, snow melting slowly against dark fabric. I apologize for frightening you. I think we passed frightening 10 minutes ago. A faint shadow crossed his face. Regret maybe. Real regret. You should never have been involved in this. In what exactly? Silence stretched briefly. Damien glanced around my tiny apartment then. The peeling paint near the windows. The crooked cabinets. The stack of nursing textbooks beside my couch. Something unreadable flickered through his expression. There are people, he said finally, who pay attention when I care about something. The words landed heavily in the quiet room. Care about something. Not someone. Something. But his eyes never left mine while he said it. I helped your grandmother for one morning. You stopped, Damien corrected softly. Everyone else kept walking. You stopped. Snow drifted steadily outside while distant sirens echoed through Queens somewhere far below. Adrian quietly moved toward the kitchen, giving us privacy without being asked. Damien stepped closer then, not enough to invade my space, just enough that I could see exhaustion beneath the sharp control he carried so effortlessly. For the first time since meeting him, he looked less like an untouchable force and more like a man carrying too much responsibility for too long. My world is not kind to gentle people, Claire, he said quietly. I know that. Then why does it feel like you were trying to pull me into it anyway? Something tightened briefly in his jaw. Not anger. Something sadder. Because I have spent most of my life surrounded by people who only move when money or fear pushes them. His voice lowered slightly. Then one exhausted girl in a cheap coat missed the most important interview of her life for a stranger lying in the rain. My throat tightened painfully. Damien looked at me like he was still trying to understand something impossible. Do you know how rare that is? He asked softly. I could not answer. Outside, snow covered the city street by street, while silence settled gently between us. Then Damien reached into his coat pocket and placed my St. Vincent acceptance letter onto the kitchen counter. I stared at it in shock. Wait, I whispered. Acceptance. One corner of his mouth lifted faintly. Congratulations, Miss Bennett. My eyes burned instantly. I got the job. You earned the job. He held my gaze steadily. I simply made certain they did not overlook you. Somewhere deep inside my chest, something shifted permanently then. Because for the first time in years, somebody powerful had looked at my struggling little life and decided it mattered.